The next speaker is Ezio Manzini, moved from science to design and social innovation. Ezio has been working for more than 2 decades in design for sustainability and social innovation. He started DESIS, D-E-S-I-S, one international network of design for social innovation. Now he's honorary professor at the Politecnico di Milano, Milan, and guest professor at Tongji University. I don't know if I pronounce very well, Tongji University in Shanghai. I only want to add 2 important books that you can find very easy in either the translation into Spanish, the first one. The title is Design When Everybody Designs, an introduction to design for social innovation. And the last book is almost just coming or recently coming. Yes, released. The title is Politics of the Everyday. So thank you for accept our invitation, Ezio. And today he will talk about the making of collaborative cities, social innovations, design, and politics for the everyday.
So, thank you, Benjamin, and thank you to everybody to be here. And I'm particularly happy to talk after the intervention of this morning. And I will be very tempted to forget whatever I prepared and to interact directly with them. I will have a kind of mediation, so I will follow my line, but trying to go back to the point that has been said. But just to introduce it, to give hopefully the spirit, I start from the Fermi's one that I find very inspiring and very interesting, because I have no tools to say if what is the citizen science is a real science, whatever real science could mean. But for sure, I think that it's an antidote against many terrible trends that are ongoing. Means empowering people, giving people the possibility to do something, and so on, and collaborating and creating a kind of collective intelligence that, as he said at the end, could be a way, he used the term to make more sexy the issue about environment, let's say, in any case, beyond the sexy or not, to make this issue more diffuse and more participate than it is today. That is a dramatic reality. Of course, I am sure that he will agree. This is not the collective intelligence that we can have as a kind of positive perspective is done only by those that are intending to be voluntary acting for science or for some scientific observation, but in some way also what has been said by Derek talking about this journalism that is diffuse. So it's a way to feed the social networks with information and in some way decentralize the place where power and knowledge are normally concentrate. And I also added, even though maybe Emanuela said she did not present it in this way, but for me, having circle of care, group of people that started to being a caregiver and receiver together and collaborate in this, it's the basic organization of a society. So it's not only this. So we have an ecology of different distributed system organization that can hopefully be the light at the end of the tunnel, because unfortunately we are in a tunnel. In any case, so when I've been asked to participate here, I said I saw what was the topic that was, because I'm in the place of somebody else. So somebody could not come, so they come. And it was my colleague in Barcelona, because I also work in Barcelona, and we are working on design for city making, and he was presenting, I imagine, the design for city making project that we are developing in Barcelona. But afterward, yesterday, coming here and discussing with some of you, trying to a little bit enter in the mood, I change it. So the city will be on the background, but I will concentrate a little bit more on people, community, cities, and especially what we learn from social innovation. So the most of the things that I'm going to say are the result of a kind of reflexive approach that me, my group, my colleagues, the whole network that are collaborating and working as designer for social innovation has had in observing what happened in this period. So the premise is something about city making. As you know, the city, normally when you talk about the city is seen as a huge organism that you can see from the top, a kind of airplane point of view on the city, and of course you can see a lot of things. So we could spend hours to describe the city that you have on the left, that by the way is Barcelona, versus the one that is on the on the right, versus the one that you have on the left. And it's so obvious that I don't have to tell it. So very well for the planning, very well for who work at this scale to describe a city. But this is not the only way to talk about the city, because the city can also be seen from inside. And the inside could be this one, and very often is this one. And the city seen from inside as a other kind of consideration that can be done, that cannot be seen from the airplane. So even though the planning, seeing things from the airplane is very important, there is something else that, by the way, is the experience of the people. When me live in the city, we don't see the city from the airplane. Normally we see the city as a journey that we do in a mesh of a system, of a service, of infrastructure, of flow, of communication, and all this together is what is the city. If in the past, for some reason that I don't have the time now to explain, but maybe it's clear, it appeared that what is enough to make the city, making the planning of the city, and more or less it worked in this way because the time was very long, that things could have the time to adjust. Today it's proven that to create the sense of the city, to create the city, you do not need only planning. You need a lot of other system of artifacts that in some way are designed. Sometimes are designed in a coherent way, sometimes are designed in a different way. In any case, there is a kind of, we all use the term ecosystem today. I think that by parentheses, ecosystem, I like to use it. I think that everybody use it because it permits us to talk about the system without giving the idea that there is one big machine. The ecosystem, by definition, is a system of many different competing systems. So if we say the city is a system, you project the idea that it's a kind of big machine with somebody that drives the machine. If you say this ecosystem, there are a lot of systems and there is a big mess, and the richness and the quality of the city is exactly this kind of messiness that we can see in between the different systems. But we can say something of the ecosystem. The ecosystem can be rich or can be poor. They are rich when there is a big variety, where there are redundancy, where there are differences, where the number of entities is very high, or you can have a reduction of this richness, the reduction of this variety and these numbers, and you have desertification. And unfortunately, maybe this will be one part of the discussion that I'm not going to do now, the main trend, if you look to the city, is toward a desertification of the ecosystem. So the reduction of the complexity of the city, assuming that the complexity is a very positive indicator of the quality of the ecosystems that represent the city. So the city making is to try to summarize what I'm saying now. So it's not only planning, it's not only architecture, it's a lot of other activities that generate different layers of artifacts and ask for a lot of design activities. And by the way, this is why the one as me that work since the beginning of my career in the design school that is not planning, it is not architecture, lately we arrived to work on cities, exactly because in the city making there are a lot of activities that have to be designed by service designer, strategic designer, communication designer, digital designer, and so on and so forth. Okay, so now I will give, I don't know, a certain number of points I ask to weave when I am near to the end. And I've seen on the program that somebody, a lady, presented something that had the same term, hyperlocal. And I'm sorry that she's not here, and I'm sorry not to be in here, so I don't know if her idea of the hyperlocal is important or not. For me, it's important to start from here because my designer point of view means many things. One of the things is for sure me, not only me, but we look to whatever we talk about by the point of view of the observer, of the people, let's say. And therefore, we have to describe in which condition the people are. Here, Derek probably is the most the authority of talking about the condition of people in this new context, so I will be much more rough than him because he is a strong researcher, I'm a poor designer. So when you talk about this globalization where we are, you can, again, it's a little bit similar to before. You can look at the scale and you see a lot of things. You see where are the city, the mega city, the world city, etc., and you can discuss for ages about that. But I like it a lot, the definition that has been given of globalization by Anthony Giddens 30 years ago, that has been for me the basic on which I started, the theoretical background on which I started to work on the globalization, that at the end of the day say, for each one of us, the globalization is something that changed our life. So we are in a global condition when I wake up in the morning and I switch on the radio or I open the newspaper and there is something, some news that happened at 30,000 kilometers from me that can give me a good or bad news and therefore a good or bad mood. So it's not that how many are we in the planet now? The 7 billion people are all in the same condition, but a lot and a growing number of people do what they do because they have their own life is influenced from something that happened very far away. So the condition of globalization can be seen not only at the big scale with the image that is on the back, but can be seen by the point of view of who is living in a certain point, in a certain locality, and being there can be influenced. Your work can change, your mood can change, your vision of the future can change. But, and this is very important for me, that I am a kind of a professional optimist, it's true also the vice versa. So it's true that if you can be influenced from something that is very far away, your action can influence what happened very far away. And if we don't understand, or if it is not so clear that we can influence, it's simply because many of our choices are so coherent with the system that do not create any friction. In some way, we influence the system, improving it, reinforcing it, making choices that make the system stronger. But this do not mean that our choices are not meaningful. So in the global society, we are influenced and we can influence. And I think that the politics of every day is to be conscious and to try to use the limits of freedom that we have. And here we can have a discussion with Derek again. I think that every human being, has some freedom, and we have the moral, ethical duty to try to extend the freedom that we can have to make choices. I am positive, maybe we should be very pessimistic, I don't know. But I know that the only thing that I can do as a designer is to try to improve the freedom of people, to extend the field of possibility in which there is a possibility to make some individual choice. This being in the hyperlocal, because I call it hyperlocal, I don't know, using hyper in the two senses. One sense is that as has been said several times, also by Derek, in the individualization of the society, that is one of the ways to tell about modernity. Every traditional social form melt, so the local is difficult to say. The local is my neighborhoods, the local is my city, the local is you, where you are. So it's hyper because it's really, really very local. At the same time, because depending on the technology that you use, is hyper because from your local, as I said before, you can have an impact on something that can happen also very far away. And when in the past, with the technologies that we had, the sphere in which we were active or in which the impact of us was a relatively limited sphere in the space, now the shape of the sphere in which we can have an impact depends on the technologies, depends on the social forms in which we are part, depends on many different things. So this condition is very peculiar and generate something that is totally new. So I said I will start from the very, very basic, at least in a simple or simplified way. So when we talk or whatever, for instance, we talk about the city, we have to know that we talk about individuals, because the process of modernization generates individuals that at the same time are connected, that lives in a hybrid space, and all of us are facing very complex issue. And the very complex issue, for reasons that we will see in a while, come in everyday life, because to educate your kids is a very complex issue. And you face as a very complex issue because tradition don't tell you anymore how you have to do it. And therefore you have in some way to face the complexity of giving and teaching and giving the example to a 15 years old person. But this is an example, we can have many of them. So this condition, in my view, creates an unprecedented social form. And as we are, as has been said, in a transition phase, we know something of the past. We try to understand where we are, but it's very difficult to understand these social forms, where are they bringing us. What we can do that is very normal is to see some trends. And I will mention some trends and some contra-trends. I will be very, of course, you can have an entire conference on each one of the short claim that I will say. One of the characteristics of the cities in particular, but I live in a countryside and I can say that it's growing also in the countryside, is that people is more and more alone. So one of the bad sides of being individualized is that progressively you feel to be alone, and feel to be alone could, for instance, have that 200,000 people, elderly people in Britain, had a conversation, only one conversation in more than a month. Of course, the quality of life of us, that we are social animals, if we have only one conversation during 30 days, could be very discussable, and it is very discussable. And it is also for who deal with services, for who deals with care, it changed totally how the society can be done, because if you have a society organized and informed that can also, for instance, talking about care, take care one of the other ones in a very normal way, as always a family and neighborhoods has done, when you have a society of individuals, to take care in the traditional way, a service that take care of all these individuals is extremely difficult, extremely costly, and practically is something that cannot be solved if we don't go in the direction that Manuela was saying too. So to invent a new communities of care that are capable, willing to reorganize some bits of the society to take care of each other. So another issue is that we see the growing of fear. For instance, fear. In Italy, it's proven that 46% of Italians feel to be in danger, where the statistic, blah, 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 say that the crime is decreasing. This is not a fake news. So, I mean, the people really feel fear. So you cannot say that it's a fake news. People feel fear. Why they feel fear, in my view? Many different reasons. First reason, they are alone. So in your life, if you have a group, if you face the difficulties of life, being part of a group is one story. If you feel to be alone, the possibility to feel that even though the number of the crime is reducing, but you know about the crime, of course you are concerned that the crime can happen to you. The third element that is happening, is changing everything, is, as has been said, this kind of filter bubbles. People, we thought, as Derek was said 30 years ago, that the network will permit everybody to talk with everybody in a kind of free way of opening discussion with, Now we know that more and more, if nothing else happens, people talk in between themselves in this kind of bubble, communication bubble, and afterward, talking with the self, you lose the capability to discuss with the different. So in some way, we are de-skilling the society in the capability to talk, and this is very grave. And at the same time, given that we talk with the people that have exactly the same idea, we start to, as I'm doing now, to shout, and to shout louder and louder, and so we have this very aggressive society that we are seeing now, and this could be a real catastrophe, and I'm for sure very, very concerned. So, the opposed, in some way, but this has been said already, opposition of what has been the most rosy idea of the past, the widespread connectivity, eliminating or disintermediating, that I remember the first time that it came in my mind, this idea of disintermediation, I say, wow, this is fantastic, we will reduce bureaucracy, we will reduce all the structure. This is the paradise. It's not bad to disintermediate, but all the structure of society was done by intermediation. So the crisis of the parties is the crisis of all the intermediation that and the party were the place where, for the good and for the bad, was possible to have conversations. See, if you have a disintermediation, you have the deliverer of some ideas and the consumer of these ideas that are directly in contact, there is no discussion. There is no democracy in that way. And also what is disappearing, and has been said, is the skill of the people. The society was kept together by the fact there was the material culture, what was called the material culture, so how to do the everyday life. That goes how to cook, how to make a marriage, how to make a funeral, how to organize the teaching to your children. More or less, this was given by the traditions. And the tradition was very concrete, was concrete way of doing things. And this was the glue. Everybody, more or less, was doing the same thing. When all this disappear, because the traditional, somebody say we live in the post-traditional society, so with this traditional way of doing disappear because they do not work anymore, also the knowledge disappear. And many of this technology, and with an acceleration with the so-called artificial intelligence, are de-skilling and de-skilling the people. So what is the result if the machine take all the information? I'm not ludist. I only consider in this moment. I consider that we are less and less capable to do things. And if you are less and less capable to do things, let's say in the normal life, this generates a problem in society. The society is less coherent, and if something happens, people do not know what to do. So it's also very fragile because we are exposed. If there is some blackout, and so you do not have all the system that tells you what to do, how to do, etc., all the system collapse. So this is, in my view, bringing towards something that has to be understood in its implication that could be good, but could be also very negative. And what we see now is, I call it, to be short, connected incompetent loneliness. So people that are lonely, people that are ignorant, and people that are connected. So the result of where we are and what we can do, and I am a positive one, so now I move to the positive side, is to keep in account that if nothing else happened, this is one way of telling the story of what happened. Luckily, there is a contra-trend. So I have not heard so much here about the term of social innovation, but I think that in the past 15 years, it's a term that more or less did not exist. Now it's spread. If you look to also the program of the European Community is full of issues about how to use social innovation. So at the end of the day, what it is, I am not going to tell you all the story about social innovation, but I want only to try to make some reflection on what happened in these 10 years. But 10 years ago, many people, very modestly including myself, started to look to something that was happening in the society, and we saw what? People that was behaving in a way that was in contradiction to whatever I said until now. So you can take all the elements that I said until now, super individualization, de-skilling, competitive attitude, incapability to talk with who is not in the same small group, ideological group with you. And we started to see people that was breaking this cage. They were not so much at the beginning, but even though the period is, as you know, unfortunately, very, well, mostly negative, reality in its complexity can be told in many ways. There is also a story that says something that grows. It's, in my view, it's a new civilization that is appearing. If you say, I don't know if you will buy the idea that it's a civilization, for me it's a civilization. So something that changed the idea of time, space, individual, etc., etc., etc. And we observe it in several different single examples: collaborative housing, collaborative network, collaborative working, collaborative agriculture, collaborative care. And we collect 100, in our wording, service ideas. So all of them are service based on the collaboration of people that at the same time get a result, and they generate some kind of exchange that are some social value. And in these 10 years, at the end, all the story become much more complex, but let's say somebody called the transformative social innovation has the shape of the face of these 100 of different ideas that we can find more or less whatever in the world. And the designers, me, are the one that help with others to make this initiative to happen, to have the hope to resist in time, to have the hope to consolidate in time, and so on and so forth. But we started this discussion more than 10 years ago. So the issue is, if you do something, you have to learn something. So what is the lecture that we have had from this? And I will indicate to you 2 or 3 that are the ones that I hope could be more interesting for our discussion today, because the lessons learned are much more than that, but I will focus on something. I remember that 3 years ago I've been invited in Paris. There is a big initiative called We Share Fest that was called After the Gold Rush. What they wanted, somebody of you was there, you know it? So let's say it has been the moment in which we moved from sharing is a fantastic idea toward sharing is a disaster, create monster. Sorry if it is in the term of your conference, but this is the opinion now. So they have been, in my view, even this organization called themselves We Share, autocritical enough to give the name of the big fest after the gold rush. So that means after the moment in which everybody was running there, discovering that something was going wrong. So what we discover is that many of the very good ideas of the beginning can go wrong. And this is obvious because are human organizations, and all the human organizations can have different direction. This do not mean that if something goes wrong, all the idea was wrong, because the innovation, the technical innovation as a social innovation, start from an idea, and after all they have a trajectory. And in this trajectory, a lot of things can happen. Many of these innovations die, also the technological innovation. Some turn in direction that somebody cannot like so much, and some other can resist and maintain some of the original value. So we can call this journey the trajectories of normalization. And I use the term normalization not as, I don't know, we don't know each other, so I don't know your spirit. But in some audience, the idea of normalize something is seen as evil. No, normalize means something that was exceptional become widespread. Therefore, per se, normalize is a good term. If we want to make something happen to change the society, these ideas have to be normalized. You cannot imagine that we call them the social hero that at the beginning are capable to do something incredible, fighting against the police, working 12 hours a day to keep this community garden alive. Well, this is fantastic, but how long they can last? How many heroes like this you have? So if they remain like this, or he die, or he becomes something not so good. where if you look, I use the story of the community garden because it's very well known. If you know around in the world, and the one that is more clear, the New York one, you have 400 community gardens in New York now, and these 400 community gardens are there, some of them since more than 30 years, and they are in some way institutionalized. They are not out of the law. They pay $1 a year to exist. They have a support by a public organization they call the Green Thumb. So they exist with those quality after more than 30 years, because in some way they create a form of institutionalization. But of course, the way to be normalized normally is not the one that I'm telling, the story of the, I have also other positive stories, but the one of the community garden. We have also the Uber. We have also the Airbnb. So we have monsters that emerge from that. So there is, of course, if you are not, if there is not consciousness, is not capable to learn from experience, it can happen that the good ideas, if they are really, really good, the guys that have the money, that have the power, that have also the cultural influence, can bring the idea and transform a good idea in something. The Uberization and the platform economy and the gig economy are all something that comes from some good social innovation ideas. But as I already anticipate, in the trajectory from the original invention to the normalization, it's not said that that one is the only one. And therefore, there is a possibility to operate, in my view, to operate through a design capability, not as a design of the designer, but the people, the involved people capability to generate what I call a transformative normality. I mean, if I keep the example of the community garden, if you go to the community garden everywhere, but they remain in New York for the moment, you see that it's still something related to a community, but the people can go to work there with the kids in a very normal way, because for them, in that neighborhoods, it became normal. But if you make 3 steps back and you look at the cities in the world, it's not normal. Therefore, we have to understand that the normality is related to a specific context, so you can break. If you always think that there is a, this is why I like ecosystem and not system, because if you think that the city, for example, is a system, or you break everything or you do not change. If you think that the city is an ecosystem, many different systems can compete, collaborate, coexist, and if some is good, could flourish. And so we can imagine these ideas when you are right to normalize some initial good idea in a way that could be accessible by many people and having the possibility to last in time as a kind of emerging new island of a new world, because as I know, as you say, as I said, it's a new civilization. Now, how can social innovation spread and last in time, maintaining the original social value? This is the research and design question. 5 minuti? The original design question. In my view, when, as everybody say, when you have a good question, you are already in the good direction. If I use my terminology, this is a kind of transformative normality, how you generate, multiply the situation in which you have these transformative normalities. And how you can have it, because you create ecosystems of service, normative, economics, etc., that are more favorable to have this kind of collaborative attitude. Richard Sennett, for sure you know, says in the fantastic book Together that this society are de-skilling us in the capability to collaborate, and we have to create conditions that permit people to be reskilled in the capability of collaboration. This is why I think that what we listened before in the 3 interventions today gave also idea of arenas in which this can happen. Of course, do not change the overall ecosystem, but could generate something that can change the balance of power. And I think that this is the only way to be active. The core, for me, the core idea is collaborating. That means we are individuals, so it's not the collaboration as in the village of the past that was not by choice, was mandatory. This is a collaboration by choice, so individual people, so that are already individualized, choose to do something together with others. And if we want to create an ecosystem that promotes collaboration, we have to go deep in what does it mean and why people collaborate and what are the implications of collaboration. And it's a common language, a common space, a common goal. And in my view, for collaboration, there is always a balance in between getting a result, because you do not collaborate. So collaborate means you do something together with others. So there has to be an economic objective, but it's very important the way in which you get this objective. So the possibility that in the process of getting a park, getting a way to care for kids, getting a way to care for elderly, getting a way to live together, sharing some services, some space, so having some result, you do it in a certain way. And the certain way has to create trust, empathy, mutual care, friendliness. And all this is what recreate the social fabric, reweave the people with the people and the people with the place. That is the issue. Of course, the relational goods have a cost. So very often what happens? That the enemy of this discussion is effectiveness. Of course, I will not say this thing as not to be effective, but it's for the sake of effectiveness that progressively all this quality, this relational quality are reduced. I don't have the time to do an example, but if somebody will ask me, I will do it. If we look at the trajectory of many of the solutions, original ideas that went with my parameters wrong, is because there has been, in the name of the effectiveness, created conditions that have been unacceptable by other point of view, or in any case, they lost the capacity to create this reweaving the society. Maybe I only say the title of the second one, that is, when we talk about this, when we talk about people that collaborate, immediately, and when we want to discuss the new social form that happens, many people, including myself, says we are building community, so it's a community building. But what we have learned from social innovation is that the community, with inverted comma, that we have to talk about now, are totally diverse from what has been the community of the past. So one of the difficulties is to make clear, when we say the new social form, and if we decide to call them communities, what we are talking about. Because we have, on one side, the super neoliberal society, well represented by Mrs. Thatcher when they said there is no such a thing as a society. So there is nothing. Society do not exist. There are only individuals. So on one side, there is a society without any internal link, so without social fabric. But unfortunately for us, the term community today is also used by the most evil in between the evil. That means those that say this is a community of us against you. And therefore there has been a kind of reintroduction of all the story about community as a reaction to the neoliberal individualism and competitiveness, trying to propose an archaic idea of or community that become politically terrible, because it's the communities of the people that are homogeneous and they have a wall, and against all the others that are outside this wall. So if we want, I want to promote through collaboration this new kind of community, we have to know that we are in a very difficult conditions that can be summarized in this adjective. First of all, it has to be intentional. So, as I said, it's something that you choose. It's not that you were born in a community, so you take it for what it is, as it was the community of the past. But it has also to be open, and this means that it's not the intentional community of the last century. Let's say, for who know it, kind of hippies communities. There was an ideological decision of what people have to do together, and this creates the group. So they have to be open, they have to be reversible, means that you are not to be preoccupied. You can enter and you can exit very quietly. And also this is as opposed to what has been the community of the past. It has to be negotiable. So what keeps us together is not written in any place. It's decided by the group. And all the example that I know is like this. So our group of people that decide to do something together in a certain way, and this generates the community. Thanks to all this, in my language, they are project-oriented. So to make this happen, you have to have the idea of what are the resources, who are you, how you can do it, how you put them together. So this is a project. So the second issue, there is an issue being related to places, and because the communities could be the virtual community that have no relationship with places. But if you take care, you cannot have a community of care that is only virtual, because care at a certain point asks for people face-to-face to care one with the other one. So if you want to have care for people, for the environment, the community have to be hybrid. They have to have also the dimension that is the physical dimension, that you can have the community building and the place rebuilding that is an intentional place. So it's a place that exists because somebody do something to make a space to be transformed in a place. We discovered that at the beginning we was very interested to the community, very, very peer, so everybody has to be the same. But we discovered to last in time, you need that in this network, you have all the people that have the power to make it happen. So the power to make it happen could mean institutions, could be other form of organizations. So the importance of having networks that in some way include also the power. And you need knowledge. So you need some knowledge that cannot be distributed because each one of us is expert in something related to your life, but maybe there is something you are not expert in. And therefore, the community have to integrate also some knowledge. So the network has to integrate also some knowledge to make something there, and also some design knowledge. And I think that I stop here. All this together, hopefully, could generate what they call a collaborative and competent network that, in my view, are the basis for having an ecosystemic-based collective intelligence. Thank you.